Hello guys, welcome to this walkthrough. I'm going to show you guys how to get through the first AWS lab regarding setting up an EC2 instance on AWS and connecting to it using SSH. So the first thing we're going to do is head on over to the AWS Educate portal. Um, of course, this whole lab is assuming that you've already set up your account. So if you haven't, go ahead and check out the PDF guide that's available on Net Academy, and make sure to set up your account first. Um, but if you're all set up, go ahead and open a web browser of your choice, and then head on over to this link. It's AWS Educate, and then sign in. Um, you should have this link in the email after you finished setting up your account. I do recommend bookmarking it as you'll be using it in the future to log in. Go ahead and sign in, and once you're in, you want to go ahead and click on My Classrooms on the top, and then you want to go ahead and choose the CIS Lab Cyber Defense course. This is our course right here. You should see Go to Classroom button. Go ahead and click it. Click Continue. It's going to open a new tab, which will redirect you to their third-party vendor. Um, if you don't get this tab, make sure to whitelist uh, the pop-up or whitelist this website on the pop-up blocker of your browser. Once you're here, however, you'll see an AWS console button. Go ahead and click it, and this will again open another tab. Make sure to allow the pop-up. Um, once you're here, this is your AWS management console, and this is where you'll manage your AWS cloud infrastructure. So in this lab, we're going to set up an EC2 instance, and we can start that by clicking the quick link available here, or clicking on services on the top left, and then clicking EC2. You're going to see a button called Launch Instance. We're going to go ahead and click that. And this will bring us to the first step in configuring our instance. So here we're going to specify which Amazon machine image we want to use. Way to think about images here are pre-configured operating systems for your instance. So there's plenty to choose from, and there's definitely paid versions as well. If you go to the marketplace, you can buy images that are pre-configured with popular, software and services such as an OpenVPN server, or you can set up Splunk, right? However, for our case, we're going to go to Quick Start and then choose the Amazon Linux 2 AMI. We're going to leave it on x86 architecture and then click Select. Uh, Something to know about is that when you see the ARM option, what that means is that you can use Amazon's in-house processors, and they're typically a lot cheaper than using Intel's CPUs. However, just keep in mind because they use the ARM architecture, not all software and runtimes will be available or compatible with the with Amazon CPU. So you might have to stick to x86 if compatibility is a concern. So we're gonna go ahead and click select, and then next we're gonna choose the instance type. What type means is what hardware configuration we want to start with. So what we mean by that is basically how many V cores we want and how much memory we want to allocate to it. So uh, think of memory as RAM, right? We're gonna stick to the T2 micro instance. This is a free tier, which means we don't have to pay for it, right? Um, Free tier has its own restrictions, of course, so something to read up on. But it does give you a brief description right here. So as you can see, it gives you up to 750 hours per month um, using this instance. On average, there is, I think, about 730 hours per month. So as long as you stick to the free instance, you should be able to run it 24/7 and not be charged. However, you're limited to only one instance. So if you make a second instance and run it at the same time as this, you're going to use up to 750 hours twice as fast, and so you might not, uh, have the free tier available for the entire month. Something to keep in mind, right? So we're going to choose the T2 micro and then click next. And then here we're going to configure um, the instance settings, but we're going to leave everything as default and go straight to the bottom where we see user data. Right here, we can do something called bootstrapping. And what that means is we can specify which commands we want the instance to run on the initial startup. And so what we want to do is we want to have it install the Apache web service on startup so that we don't have to later on. And the way to do that is to first specify which shell you want to use in Linux. You can do that by hitting an pound and then exclamation mark, and then specifying the path to your shell. The most popular is bin bash, so that's your this is your path to the bash shell, which is the most common. There's also something like Z shell, right? But for our purposes, we're gonna stick to bash, and then the first line we're gonna use it to install the service, and Amazon's AMI uses the Yum package manager rather than apt, as we've seen in other Linux operating systems such as Ubuntu or any Debian-based one. So we're gonna type in yum install -y httpd. So what this does is we're installing the Apache service, which is httpd here, or http daemon, which is what you call services on Linux. The -y is to we're essentially telling it, like, if it asks us, "Are you sure?" or "Do you want to confirm?" to automatically answer yes. So that way, we don't, it won't be halted or anything like that when that confirmation prompt comes up. The next line we want to do is enable the service startup, or enable the Apache service to start up whenever we reboot the instance. So we're going to use the system control command, and then we're going to type in enable httpd. Then we're going to actually start the service using system control start httpd. And then we're going to go ahead and pass along our HTML code for the default index page on the Apache service, so that we have something to look at when we access the website on a browser. To do that, we're going to go ahead and echo what we want to put in the file. So we're going to start with the HTML tag, and then let's say a header 1, and then we're going to tell it what we want in that line. So we're going to tell it, let's say this is a test below. And then we're going to encapsulate it using an ending tag. So, oops, h1, and then we have to encapsulate HTML as well. And then we're going to end it with the apostrophe. Next, we want to use the right-facing arrow character. Not entirely sure what it's called, but it's above the, if you do shift the period, this is the key that I'm talking about. What this does is we're telling it to pass the output of the echo command onto a file, which we'll specify here as the index file. So we're going to go ahead and put in the path to that file, which is /var. I believe it's HTTP, then index.html. I'm going to double check that real quick. Might be something missing here. So yeah, I am missing part of the path. It's actually /var/www. So let's see here. Figured that didn't look right. So I'm going to go ahead and double check that everything looks good according to the lab. HTML index.html, right? So notice that I typed out the actual commands rather than copying and pasting from the lab. The reason to do that is that there's a possibility that if you paste the commands from the lab, you might run into errors because of spacing or white spaces. So it's just better for you to type it and then just double check to make sure that the commands actually match character for character, of course. So once you confirm that, go ahead and click next, add storage, and then we're going to specify the storage for this instance. We're going to leave it on default 8 gigabytes, as that is enough for this instance, right? And we're going to leave the encryption disabled and delete on termination checkmarked. What this means here is that if later we terminate our instance, which is essentially deleting our instance, the volume that's attached to it, which is this one here, will also be deleted along with it. The reason I want to keep it on is so that if I delete that instance, I also want the volume to delete as well. That way it doesn't stay behind and then I get charged for having that volume, right? Granted, this is a free tier, so I wouldn't be charged anyway, but I like to, you know, uh, delete it, once I delete the instance as well. So you click next. And here we're going to specify our tags. Now, tags are essentially just key value pairs that we can attach to our instance for our own purposes. So this is just to organize and to be able to search through our instances in the future. This does not affect the instance itself. So an example here being the name of the instance. It's a capital N. And then the value, we can name it, let's say, web server 1. Then we're going to add another tag. And we're going to name this one, I guess we'll use it for department. And then we're going to assign it to the development department, right? So now we know this is the name of the web server and it belongs to the development department. We could even include another tag and say, like, oh, the manager for this department is, John Doe or something like that, right? Although we don't have to do that. We're going to click next. And here we're going to configure our security group. What you think of security groups are as firewall rules that can be attached to your instance. The cool thing about security groups is that you can pre-configure them and then attach them to whichever instance you want. So you can have multiple security groups for different um, instances on AWS. So here we're going to create a new one, and then we're going to name it Web Server SG for security group. Then I'm going to name description security group for test web server. Then the first rule by default is the SSH rule to allow any connections on port 22 from any location. 0000/0 essentially says that you can connect from any IP address. So this will be open to the public. We'll give a description SSH from anywhere. Then we're going to add a second rule, and then we're going to specify HTTP. And notice by default it fills out 80 because that is the default port for HTTP or web service. And then we'll leave it to anywhere as a source, so that way anyone, anywhere can access the or connect to this port. We'll name this HTTP from anywhere. All right, and then we're going to click review and launch, and this will give us a quick summary of our entire configuration. So there's a good chance to double check that everything's good, and then hit launch. We're gonna make a new existing key pair. So we're gonna select create a new key pair, and then we're gonna name it whatever we like. It would be nice to keep it similar to name of the web server, for example, so that we know this key belongs to that web server. So we're gonna name it web server 1 key, and then you're going to go ahead and download your key pair. So what this does is this will save the private key to your computer so that you can use it to connect to the instance, which is saving the public key. Without your private key, you will not be able to connect to your instance, so you have to make sure to save it in a safe location. Ideally, in the real, you also want to back it up into a very secure, location, preferably offline, right? Um, the what this means is that we also can't use passwords to connect to your instance. By default, they use public-private keys, and that is solely, as a security, I would say security precaution, right? Uh, by using key pairs, we're essentially getting rid of passwords for authentication. Once you ensure that you've downloaded your key pair, you're going to go ahead and click Launch Instances. I'm going to have an error. So it looks like I already have a security group named Web Server SG. That was probably from before when I did a quick run through the lab. So I'm going to go back to review screen and modify the name of the security group real quick. And I'm going to name it the SG1, let's say. You're not necessarily going to get this error. This is just because I already ran through the lab before. Click launch. And do create a new. Oh, I think it should already have my key saved. Web server 1 key. Yep. So since I already have my key created, I'm just going to choose an existing key pair. I'm essentially double checking that, yeah, I have the key with me. I'll be able to access to my instance. So go ahead and click launch. Hopefully it works this time. Looks like it is working. Cool. So now that that's launching, what we want to do in the meantime is set up the private key so that we can use it PuTTY. So to connect to your web server, we're going to use something called PuTTY. If you don't have it installed already, what you're going to do is go to puttygen.com. And when you're here, you're going to go to download PuTTY and then choose the appropriate operating system that you're using. If you're on Windows, you're going to click PuTTY for Windows and then scroll to the bottom. And you'll see some download options here to install it. 32 or 64-bit, either works. Just don't want that's appropriate for you. If you want to just use a portable uh, executable or binary, you can download these here as well. I'm going to go ahead and download the 64-bit and install it. So you click it and it should start the download. So just give it some time. Yep, save file. And it should be downloaded already. So I'm going to go to my downloads folder and you'll see that I have the installer right here. I'm going to go ahead and double click it. Can you click next? Notice that I already have it installed. So it's just asking if I want to remove or repair it. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel since I already have it. Click yes. But if you're going through the installer, essentially you can leave everything as default and click next until you finish installing it, and you should be good. Once you finish installing it, you're going to open up puttygen. And what we're going to do here is we're going to convert the PEM file we downloaded earlier, which is my downloads folder, my private key, into the file format that PuTTY can use, which we'll need to use later, right? So we're going to click load, and then I'm going to specify the file I want to use. You're not going to see it at first because it's looking for a PuTTY key. So what we're going to do is change this to all files, and then you should be able to see your PEM file here. Let's go ahead and choose it, click open, and then it's going to tell you that it automatically converted it to the PPK file format, which is what we want. Once it's in here, you want to click on Save Private Key, and then click Yes. For now, we're not going to put a passphrase on it. And then I'm going to save it to my user folder, and I'll explain why later on. I'm going to name it Web Server 1 Key, and it will automatically append ppk to it. So save. If I go to my user folder, it should be in there now. I'm gonna double check. Here it is, web server 1key.ppk. Now, reason I place my keys in my user folder is that basically I also want to put my pen file in there actually. The reason is that if you want to use the command line, for example, or a terminal to connect using SSH, um, when you specify which private key you want to use to authenticate, um, it helps to have it in your user folder already, so that way you should only tell it the file name rather than the entire path to your wherever the key is at, right? Because by default, when you open the command line, the default working directory is your user folder. So it's good to have the keys in here already. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and close all this, and then we're gonna go ahead and open PuTTY, and we're gonna go ahead and enter our instance information so we can connect to it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to our AWS console. Um, at this point, it should already be launched. So we're gonna go ahead and view instances, and it's going to show us our running instances, or all our instances, I should say. You can see here I have the prior one from doing the lab earlier. So what we want is we want to get the public IP address for our web server, and it will be down here. So you see we have a 954 address right here. We're gonna go ahead and copy it. You can also use the public IPv4 DNS. That works as well. But I'm gonna go ahead and use the actual numbers. If you're having trouble getting to this to the dashboard for EC2, you can go ahead and go on services and then click on EC2, and then you can click on instances to see all your running instances, and that should be that. So now that I copied the IPv4 address, I did use Control C instead of right clicking, because when you right click, you'll get the context menu for AWS rather than your actual web browsers. So Control C will do it. I'm gonna paste it in here, and then what I want to do now is I want to specify which private key to use when authenticating. So I'm gonna expand SSH in the left pane, click on authentication, and then I'm gonna specify which private key to use. So I know it's in my user folder, which is here. I'm gonna choose web server 1 key, open it. Now I'm gonna go back to session. I'm gonna save the session so I don't have to enter this information again in the future. I'm gonna name it web server, or let's put web server 1. Then I'm gonna click save, and now I have a pre-configured uh, SSH session essentially. So I'm gonna go ahead and click it to choose it, and then I'm gonna open it. So you're gonna get this alert, and this is telling you essentially this is getting the fingerprint of the server, the public key of it, so that you can know if you're actually connecting to the right server or not. This is a security measure. If you haven't connected to it before, you're gonna get this alert. You go ahead and click yes, and then you're gonna be prompted to specify which user you want to log in as. So by default, on when using the Amazon AMI, the default user is EC2 user. You hit enter, and then we're in. So it authenticated using my private key that I specified earlier, and now I have an SSH session to the instance. So notice on the left, I have the user that I'm logged in as, and then the host name of the instance. So it's the computer name, right? So if I type in pwd, this is going to show me my current location on the instance. So you can see that I'm currently in the home, and then my user directory. If I want to see what's in here, I can type in, I use the list command, right? And I could list everything by typing, using the LA flags. So this means listed in a listed format, and then the A means show everything, right? Or all, including hidden folders. So I'm hit enter, and then you can see that there's a few hidden files and a hidden directory um, located in my user folder. If we cd to it or change directory .ssh, so we're gonna go into that directory and then use the ls command again. We're gonna see that there's one file in here named authorized keys. So to see the contents of that key, we're gonna type in cat authorized keys. What this means is we're telling it to print out essentially what's in this file. We're gonna hit enter, and then notice that it printed out this RSA SSH key. What this means is this is actually the public key that is matched to the private key we downloaded earlier. So if we're using any other private key that's not matching to this public key, we're not going to be able to connect and or be authorized or authenticate, I should say. So this is where it's actually stored, um, the other half, right? Um, that should be it for this lab. The alternative to using PuTTY is to use the actual command line that's built into your computer. So we go ahead and log out. Use the log out command or just close the window. We can actually open up any command line, or you can use terminal if you're on Windows, and you can download this through the Microsoft Store. Notice that it opens PowerShell by default, so you can actually use PowerShell or command line by typing in CMD or command prompt. Another way to get to it is to right click and then click PowerShell. So keep in mind when you use PowerShell, you can automatically use any of the commands that are already available on the command prompt. So it's kind of like a one shoe fits all, right? So to get to the instance using the command line that's built into your computer, rather than using a third-party tool like PuTTY, is to use the SSH command. So like we saw previously, we have to specify which private key to use to authenticate. The way you do that in SSH is to use the I flag, and then we're going to specify the name of the file. So we know the name is web server one key dot pem. So notice this time we're using the original file rather than the PuTTY version. And then we're going to specify the username that we want to log in as. So that's going to be EC2 user at, and then we're going to actually paste the IP address from the instance. So we're going to go ahead and copy this. And then right clicking will paste automatically. Oh, I guess not. Control V. Did I not save this? Copy. Okay, I guess it doesn't work. We're going to go ahead and type it out then. 34.229.244.0. Then we're going to hit enter. Notice that we get the same exact prompt, like, are you sure you trust this host? This is the fingerprint. We're going to go ahead and click yes, or type in yes. And it's going to add it to the trusted host file. So now you can see that we're actually logged into our instance using SSH. If I type in pwd again, I'll see my working directory. ls, la, you can see the same files as before in directories. So this is how you connect this, or using PuTTY. This is how you would connect to your instance to manage it if it's using Linux. If you had a Windows instance, you would use Remote Desktop Protocol, which is by default installed on Windows machines. You type in RDP, and it'll come up, and you'll specify the address and the username you want to connect as. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and before we finish up is we want to see if the website's actually running, or the web service. A couple of ways to do that. The first way, of course, is to actually hit the web page on a web browser. The way to do that is we're going to get the public IPv4 address again, copy it, open a new tab, paste the IP address in here, and hit enter. And this will bring us to the default page for Apache. So notice that the what we typed in earlier on the index page didn't actually show up. That's because we need to actually configure Apache to not do that. Of course, we're not going to actually do that today. It's outside the scope of this lab, but now we know that we're able to actually connect to the web server using the web browser, meaning that port 80 is indeed open as we specified in the security group, and that the Apache service is running. So that's good. Another way to check is actually when we connect to the terminal. So if we open the PuTTY again and select our profile that we saved earlier and click open, specify the user, so EC2 user, and hit enter. Now that we're in, what we can do is we can actually use the system control command to get a status on daemon or the service for Apache. So we do system CTL or system control status HTTPD, hit enter. We'll see that it is actually active and running right now, so we know it's actually working. Another way to check is to see the running processes. If we hit top, this will show us a list of currently running processes on the machine in order from highest CPU consuming or consumption to lowest. This is not always the best way to see if it's running or not, though, because as you can see, HTTPD doesn't show up until down here under Apache, the Apache user, and that is because unless someone's actually running or hitting the website, it's not really doing anything right. All right, if you want to get out of this, you can use Control C, and then we're out. And then we'll go ahead and log out to exit. So that pretty much wraps up the lab. Of course, if you have any issues such as not being able to connect using SSH, make sure that you're using the correct IP address, which is available on the console, and that port 22 is open. The way to check that is to go to security groups, under network and security, and then you'll see your current configured security groups. We're going to use the one that we used, which is web server SG1, and you'll see the currently configured rules. Should have 22 and 80 open from any source. If not, you can edit the inbound rules and add it as you like. Okay. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next lab.